For the brief summary of our topic, one of the significant moments in the Philippine history was the Declaration of Independence. Following 300 years of Spanish rule, Emilio Aguinaldo led Filipino insurgents declare the independence of the Philippines during the Spanish-American War. Midway through August, American troops and Filipino revolutionaries had driven the Spanish from the Philippines. But Aguinaldo's dreams of independence were crushed when the United States legally took over our country as its peace agreement from Spain. In repressing the Philippines, over 4,000 Americans have lost their lives. More than 10 times as many were slain. And over 20,000 Filipino militants and an undetermined number of civilians were slain too. With the American consent, the Commonwealth of the Philippines was created in 1935, and Manuel Quezon was chosen as the nation's first leader. The United States awarded the Republic of the Philippines full freedom on July 4, 1946. The Declaration of Philippine Independence was written by, I'm sorry if I'm gonna pronounce it wrong, by lawyer Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista, also referred to as Don Boshong. He was the one who delivered the proclamation out loud. The former President Diosdado Macapagal altered the celebration's original date from July 4 to June 12 in honor of Emilio Aguinaldo's Proclamation of Independence from the Spanish. That is why every June 12, Philippine independence is observed. Over a long period of time, the nation was colonized by numerous countries, and after all the struggles you've endured, imagine yourself being free. It is priceless.
June 12, 1898. This day marked the pinnacle of Philippine history as hope and freedom shone from the sun's rays along with the declaration of independence of the said country from the hands of the American colonizers. Let us join hands as we unveil these facts and more. I am Hannah Melcomnang, and this day in history, the Proclamation of Philippine Independence. After being enslaved by Spaniards for 333 years, spending 48 years in hands of Americans, and being occupied by Japan for almost 5 years, the Philippines has finally seen the light of independence, which all persevering warriors and leaders had fought for years. This event has been the most significant achievement of Aguinaldo's dictatorial government, as proclamation of the Philippine independence was conducted in Kawit, Cavite on June 12, 1898. The day was declared a national holiday. Thousands of people from the province gathered in Kawit to witness the historic event. The ceremony was solemnly held at the balcony of General Emilio Aguinaldo's residence. The military and civil officials of the government were in attendance. A dramatic feature of the ceremony was the formal unfurling of the Filipino flag, which was shown at 535 Morrison Hill Road in Hong Kong by Marcela Gonzalo, Dr. Lorenza and Delphine Herbosa de Natividad amidst the cheers of the people. At the same time, the Philippine national anthem was played by the band. Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista solemnly read the Act of Declaration of Independence, which he himself wrote. The declaration was signed by 98 people.
The author of the Philippine Declaration of Independence, Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista y Altamira, born in December 7, 1830, and died in December 4, 1903. He was also known as Don Bosio. He was a Filipino lawyer and the author of the Declaration of Philippine Independence. Bautista solicited funds to finance a campaign for reforms in the Philippines, later becoming a member of the La Liga Filipina. Cuerpo de Compromisarios and La Propaganda. In 1896, the Spaniards arrested and imprisoned him at Fort Santiago. He was suspected of being involved in the Philippine Revolution. Bautista elected to defend himself and was later released from prison. In 1898, Bautista became the first advisor to President Emilio Aguinaldo and subsequently wrote the Declaration of the Philippine Independence. During that time, on June 12, 1898, Aguinaldo proclaimed the independence of the Philippines at his house in Cavite El Viejo. Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista wrote the Declaration and read this document in Spanish that day at Aguinaldo's house.
The proclamation of Philippine independence in Cavite on June 12, 1898 was to encourage other countries or to push people to fight against the Spaniards and to be freed from the control of the Spaniards, because we believe that we all have the right to live freely and independently. Also to be recognized by the foreign countries that the Philippines is an independent country.
The document was written during the Spanish-American War. Emilio Aguinaldo proclaimed the independence of the Philippines. After all these 300 years, the Spaniards ruled the Philippines, and by mid-August, Philippine rebels led by Emilio Aguinaldo and the U.S. troops had ousted the Spaniards, but Aguinaldo's hope for independence were dashed when the United States formally annexed the Philippines as part of its peace treaty with Spain. 1898, the Spanish-American War broke out over Spain's brutal suppression of a rebellion. Series of decisive U.S. victories occurred on May 1, annihilated the Spanish Pacific Fleet at the Battle of Manila Bay in the Philippines. From his exile, Aguinaldo made arrangements with U.S. authorities to return to the Philippines and assist the United States in the war against Spain, and landed on May 19, rallied his revolutionaries and began liberating towns south of Manila. In 12, he proclaimed Philippines independence and established a provincial government, of which he subsequently became head. The Americans occupied Manila and planned peace negotiations with Spain. Aguinaldo convened a revolutionary assembly, the Malolos, in September, first ever in Asia, and a government was formed with Aguinaldo as president in January 1899. The U.S. Senate voted by one vote to ratify the Treaty of Paris with Spain. The Philippines were now a U.S. territory, acquired in exchange for $20 million in compensation to the Spanish. In response, Aguinaldo formally launched a new revolt, this time against the United States, as Congress authorized the deployment of 60,000 troops to subdue them. By the end of 1899, there were 65,000 U.S. troops in the Philippines. But the war dragged on. Many anti-imperialists in the United States, such as Democratic presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan, opposed U.S. annexation of the Philippines. But in November 19,000, Republican William McKinley was re-elected and the war continued.
Facts about the Proclamation of the Philippine Independence. Number 1. Independence Day was changed by President Diosdado Macapagal from July 4, 1946 to June 12, 1898. We celebrate our country's Independence Day every June 12 to commemorate Emilio Aguinaldo's original proclamation of Philippine independence from Spain on the same date in 1898. However, territorial integrity and sovereign power were absent from the Philippines when Emilio Aguinaldo proclaimed its independence on June 12, 1898. Without outside acknowledgement, the area lacked validity. Aguinaldo's administration lacked sovereignty as well because the Philippines was still governed by Spain at the time. The Philippines was colonized by United States from the start of the 19th century until 1946. When we gained independence from the West July 4, 1946, that was the time when Philippines officially became a state where it had people, territory, government, and sovereignty. So why do we still acknowledge June 12 as our Independence Day instead of July 4? Macapagal gave a speech on June 12, 1962, in which he explained his decision to change the Philippines Independence Day to June 12, 1898. He insisted that June 12 should be celebrated as the nation's actual Independence Day because it marked the beginning of the independent Filipino nation. He also stated that June 12, 1898 is the true birthday of an independent Filipino nation, for it was this day that they called the whole world to witness their powerful resolve to consider themselves absolved of allegiance to the Spanish crown. Therefore, the reason June 12 is designated as Araw ng Kalayaan is because it was on that day that Filipinos demonstrated to the rest of the world how highly they cherish freedom and democracy and demonstrated our independence. Consequently, the Independence Day of Philippines was created. Number 2. In Hong Kong, Marcela Agoncillo created the Philippine flag that was raised to proclaim our independence. Emilio Aguinaldo visited Marcela Agoncillo and asked her to make the flag while she was in Hong Kong. The Philippine flag were sewed by Marcela Agoncillo, her daughter Lorenza, and Delfina Herbosa de Natividad, Dr. Jose Rizal's niece, and it took them 5 days to finish sewing the flag. Number 3. The original Philippine flag design ordered by Emilio Aguinaldo. The original flag ordered by Emilio Aguinaldo has some more details compared to the flag that we recognize today. The original flag contains a mythical-looking golden sun stood in the triangle's middle. In addition, the triangle's 4 corners each had 3 5-pointed stars. The phrase Fuerzas Expedicionarias del Norte de Luzon, which translates to Expeditionary Forces of Northern Luzon, was also embroidered in the center of the flag, along with the words Libertad, Justicia, and Igualdad, which means liberty, justice, and equality, which are surrounded by laurel branches. And in 1936, the white triangle on the flag was lengthened. And lastly, number 4, one of the 3 stars in the Philippine flag does not originally represent Visayas. The islands of Mindanao, Panay, and Luzon are symbolized by 3 stars on the Philippine flag. One of the archipelago's 3 major islands during the time was Panay and was not Visayas. But now we recognize the 3 stars in the Philippine flag as Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao.
Contribution to history. Philippine Independence Day is purposed to give apparent value toward the sovereignty of the country, giving recognition to the fact that the Philippine government is centralized and has supreme authority, both legitimate and internationally recognized, over the territory of the Philippine land. This idea is not simple as just having authority over masses of land, for these lands where fellow Filipino live and form community, and this community are the citizens that carry the culture and tradition of our ancestor. It is the people that gave life color to every land that the Philippines own government has sovereignty over. Our ancestors realized this value, which is why they give their lives so that the people of the country would have freedom and independence. In the past, the Philippines was under Spanish rule for over 3 centuries. The very name of the country was even named after King Philip II of Spain. During this colonial period, there were many abuses and tragedies that plagued the Philippines, and in the hardships, individuals decided to fight against such injustices. One example is Jose Rizal, a polymath, political activist, and writer who wrote the novels No Limitang Here and Il Filibusterismo, wherein he conveyed through ink the severity of injustices the Spanish enacted to the Filipino. Another example is Andres Bonifacio, who led the Katipunan group that was proposed for revolution in the Spanish colonial period. In 1896, Rizal was executed for claims that were made saying that Rizal supported such a revolution, where in fact he pushed for reform more than revolution in the first place.